There is an entity that have destroyed nations. It has ravished relationships and crushed dreams. I am referring to sin. The word sin means to miss the mark. The question then becomes, what is the mark or the target? The goals, the behavior, the speech God has established for mankind is the target. When mankind miss the target, we sin. Sin can be broken down into 4 classifications. The first classification you'll find in James 4:17, which is the sin of neglect. It is when a person that knows the good they ought to do and don't do it, it is sin. For example, neglecting to read the Bible, pray, be kind, eat healthy, work out, or get a job. The second sin classification is trespass, which can be found in Luke 17:4. Trespass is intentionally violating God's divine law. However, when it comes to trespass, the motive of breaking God's divine law is rooted in emotion or passion. For example, a person can be on a date and get caught up in the passion of a moment and end up having sex with their date. The third classification of sin is transgression. Transgression means to step across the line. Transgression is the deliberate, willful decision and action to violate God's divine law. It is not falling into sin due to being caught up in the moment. It is premeditated sin. The fourth and final category of sin is iniquity. Iniquity is when unrepentant sins develop in the heart of man. Iniquity is more of an attitude of the heart rather than a violation of God's commands. It is a heart of rebellion, lawlessness, and wickedness. It is the heart that operates as if God does not exist. Now, man's heart is made up of 4 chambers. The first chamber of man's heart is his mind, which encompasses his intellect, imagination, and perspective. The second chamber of man's heart is his will. The third portion of man's heart is his emotions. And the fourth chamber of man's heart is his conscience. Let's examine how sin affects each chamber of man's heart. So sin affects man's mind in warping his perspective. And based off the wiring of a person, sin will either cause a person to abandon all reasoning and have an inflated perspective of self, which is called pride, or sin will cause a person's perspective of self to shrink and leave a person with a low self-esteem. Romans 8:7 indicates that a sinful mind is hostile towards God. Sin will eventually mold a person's ideologies into its own image, giving its host a pessimistic perspective. Sin affects man's will in a different way. If will consisted of many cogs turning towards a single decision, then sin wears down the grooves in the cogs, making it difficult to have the fortitude to make a decision based on what's best. 2 Timothy 3:6 explains that sin can cause a person to be weak-willed. Sin causes people to be dominated by their impulses. Now, sin's impact on the emotions of man vary. It makes some people feel sad while others beat themselves up over sin. Sin can cause the individual to experience patterns of self-condemnation. Sin causes people to struggle with expressing or understanding their and other people's emotional state, which may lead to individuals being socially awkward or inappropriate. And sin has a different effect on the conscience as well. Sin can sear the conscience according to 1 Timothy 4:2. A seared conscience is when a person no longer are convicted of their sins. Sin can also make your conscience overactive. You see this on display when a person consistently feel bad about things that are not sin. An overactive conscience will find ways to make a person feel bad over things that were out of that person's control. Sin's effect on the human body is often not discussed. 1 Corinthians 6:18 warns all to run from sexual immorality, stating all other sins a man commits are outside the body, but he who sins sexually sins against his own body. body. In the past half century, the world has witnessed a steep decline in fertility rates in every country on Earth. The sperm count in men have declined by 50% in the past 40 years. Cases of major sexually transmitted diseases in the U.S. have largely increased, and 4 new STDs have emerged since 2018. It has been documented that men that have contracted gonorrhea at any point of their life increases the risk of developing prostate cancer by 20%. Research in 2022 showed that a past chlamydia infection could as much as double a woman's risk of ovarian cancer. God mentioned run from sexual sins because he knew we were literally running for our lives.